It started out like any other Saturday morning. I was in my kitchen, sipping coffee, just enjoying the peace after a long week on duty as a state trooper. Everything seemed normal and I noticed a line of cars pulling up and people unloading. Tables and decorations. Confused, I stepped outside only to find a full-blown event being set up. In my own driveway, at first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they had the wrong house. But that hope vanished when a woman in a bright pink sun hat came marching up to me, arms crossed and attitude fully loaded. She didn't ask whose property it was. She didn't introduce herself. She just demanded I move my car because, in her words, I was blocking the space they rented for a community luncheon. I calmly told her this was my home, my private property. That's when she went full Karen. Her tone sharpened and the entitlement kicked in. She told me I'd regret messing with her event and that she had already called the authorities. What she didn't know what made this all the more ridiculous was that I was the authority. A state trooper for over a decade, trained to de-escalate far worse situations. But I stayed quiet, just waiting to see how far she'd take it. She didn't even stop to think before dialing 911, acting like I was some random troublemaker refusing to cooperate. Meanwhile, I stood there in sweatpants, watching this circus unfold in my driveway. As I heard the sirens start to roll in, Karen stood proud like she'd just won a battle. She had no idea what was coming next. The look on her face when the responding officers got out of the car. Well, let's just say that part you won't want to miss as the patrol car pulled into the street. I stayed back, arms folded, watching everything play out. Karen still completely unaware and toward them, like some kind of hero in a low-budget movie. She waved her arms dramatically and started pointing at me like I was a trespasser who'd just ruined her big day. The officers stepped out, both guys I knew from my own department. I could tell by the look in their eyes they already recognized me. But they played it cool, letting her ramble about how I was being hostile, refusing to move my vehicle and disrupting a permitted event. Thing is, there was no permit. I knew because nobody had contacted the HOA. No flyers were passed around, and more importantly, this was my property, my private driveway, not public space. Still, I let her dig her own hole, standing there like I was just some random neighbor, getting publicly shamed. She kept talking, getting louder, trying to make a scene in front of the handful of guests. Still confused and unloading folding chairs near my garage, I couldn't help but wonder who does that. Who books an event on someone's private driveway without even asking? Did she actually believe she had the right? Or was this some power move she thought she could get away with because I wasn't in uniform? That's the thing about people like her. They assume the loudest voice wins. But respect isn't about volume. It's about boundaries. This one she clearly crossed. One of the officers finally turned to me and asked, "Do you want to explain what's going on?" I gave a small nod and took a breath. Karen's smile started to fade as she realized something was off. I could feel the shift in the air, but I wasn't about to make it easy for her. Not yet. I looked over at the officers and could tell they were holding back smirks. They knew exactly what was going on, but like true professionals, they kept things neutral for now. Karen crossed her arms and gave me this smug look, like she was convinced she had the upper hand. "Go ahead," one officer said, nodding at me again. "Tell us your side." I kept my voice calm, not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because I've learned over the years that staying steady rattles people more than yelling ever could. I said, "This is my house. This is my driveway. I've lived here for 6 years. I didn't give anyone permission to throw a party here, and I have no idea who this woman is." Karen's jaw twitched, but she didn't speak. I could feel the wheels turning in her head. The officer turned back to her and asked, "Ma'am, do you have a permit or any written approval to host an event here?" That's when the cracks started showing. She fumbled in her bag, pulling out a folded paper that looked more like a grocery list than any kind of permit. It didn't even have an address, just a vague mention of a community luncheon near Maplewood Drive. I'm on Maplewood Drive, but this wasn't near anything. It was directly on my property. As they examined the paper, one of the guests, an older man holding a tray of cupcakes, walked over and asked if everything was okay. Turns out, he thought the party was happening at the nearby park, not someone's private home. That's when it hit me. Corinne probably misled the entire guest list. She wanted the convenience of a wide driveway and shade from the trees, and she figured she could just take it. But why my house? Was it personal? A grudge? Or just random, bold entitlement? The officers exchanged another glance. Karen's confidence wavered. And I had a feeling this situation was about to reveal way more than I expected. The tension was thick enough to cut through as Karen's guests slowly started to realize they were part of something way messier than a simple picnic. The officers stood firm, but their eyes kept flicking between Karen and me, like they were waiting for the next move to tip the scales. Karen's voice dropped, trying to sound reasonable, but it came out shaky. "I booked this space. I paid for it. You're just being difficult." I shook my head. "You didn't book anything here. This is my driveway. You never asked. You just showed up." The words hit harder than I expected, and a few guests shifted uncomfortably. It was like the whole party was deflating, but Karen refused to back down. One of the officers pulled out his radio and spoke quietly. I knew he was calling dispatch to confirm my identity as a state trooper. That fact alone was about to flip the whole situation. Karen still didn't realize who I was, and I could see her scrambling to hold on to control, but the pieces were slipping through her fingers fast. She glanced at the approaching patrol cars and the increasing number of neighbors who had come outside, drawn by the commotion. I recognized some faces, people who dealt with Karen's attitude before, the kind who loved stirring trouble but hated getting called out. The crowd was growing, the whispers spreading like wildfire. Suddenly, Karen's expression shifted. She pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. I wasn't sure if she was calling for backup, posting a video, or trying to spin the story before anyone else could get the full picture. But I knew this wasn't just about a blocked driveway anymore. It was about control, pride, and who's really in charge. As the officers turned back toward me, ready to make a move, Karen took a step closer, eyes blazing, lips tightening like she was ready to say something that would change everything. The air felt electric, like the moment before. A storm breaks. And in that frozen second, I realized this wasn't just a driveway dispute anymore. It was about to become a showdown nobody expected, just as Karen's lips parted to unleash whatever bomb she was ready to drop. One of the officers suddenly stepped forward and held up his hand to stop her. His expression shifted from calm to serious in an instant, and he said quietly, "We need to take a closer look at this." He motioned to the paper she'd shown earlier and then glanced toward the house. That's when things took an unexpected turn. From behind the fence, a woman appeared, someone no one had noticed before. She looked upset, scanning the scene with a mix of frustration and something else I couldn't quite place. The woman walked over, her voice steady but firm as she spoke to the officers. "Excuse me, but that event was supposed to be held here with permission from the homeowner." I blinked, confused. Permission? That wasn't what I'd been told. The tension thickened. Karen's confident mask cracked, and she suddenly looked even more rattled. The new woman pulled out her phone and showed a series of text messages between her and Karen discussing the event, and then one sent to her from me, or so it seemed. But something felt off. The texts weren't from me. They were cleverly forged. complete with my name and even a fake signature. It was clear someone had been trying to frame me or cause trouble behind the scenes. The officers exchanged concerned glances, the situation escalating beyond a simple dispute over a driveway. Karen's eyes widened in panic, and the crowd fell silent. Now the conflict wasn't just about blocking a party, it was about deception, a possible setup, and questions about trust and truth. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. This wasn't just a neighbor problem anymore. This was bigger. Much bigger. And in that moment, I realized the real story was only just beginning. The air was thick with tension as the officers gathered around the phone, carefully examining the messages. The woman who had appeared, turns out, her name was Lisa. A close friend of mine explained everything clearly. These texts were never from him. Karen must have forged them to make it look like he gave permission for the event. The officers nodded slowly, their expressions hardening as the truth started to unfold. Karen's smugness was gone. She looked caught, cornered, and desperate all at once. When one officer finally asked her why she'd staged the whole thing, her voice cracked. "I just wanted to make a statement. He's always been difficult. I thought if I pulled this off, maybe he'd back down for once." That admission changed the entire vibe. It wasn't just about a driveway or a party, it was about control, respect, and some long-standing grudge nobody else had known about. I took a deep breath and said, "This is private property. No one has the right to use it without permission. And falsifying messages to try and trick me, that's a serious offense." Karen's shoulders slumped as the officers explained the legal consequences she could face for forgery and trespassing. She looked around at the growing crowd, realizing her plan had backfired spectacularly. Guests started packing up quietly, some apologizing to me, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Just when it seemed like things were settling, one officer handed me his radio and said, "There's something else you need to know." His voice was low, serious. "We ran the license plate of the lead car here. It's tied to an active investigation." Suddenly, the whole event took on a new, darker meaning. Karen's eyes widened again, but this time with fear. I felt the ground shift beneath me. What had started as a petty neighborhood fight was now tangled in something much bigger. And the real story was far from over. The shock from that last piece of news hung in the air like a storm about to break. The officers exchanged looks, then one stepped forward and explained quietly, "The lead vehicle here is connected to a recent string of local scams." I looked over at Karen, whose face had turned pale. Suddenly, it wasn't just about a fake event or a blocked driveway anymore. It was about something much bigger. And I was right in the middle of it. As the officers started taking statements from the guests and gathering evidence, I stepped back and let the professionals handle the rest. Lisa stayed by my side, helping clarify details about the forged messages and the real permission, something Karen had tried desperately to cover up. The crowd slowly dispersed, many neighbors expressing relief that the situation was being cleared up, but still surprised by how far things had escalated. In the end, Karen faced the consequences of her actions: forgery, trespassing, and obstruction of justice were all part of the charges she would have to deal with. It wasn't just about entitlement or misunderstanding anymore. It was about accountability. I realized how important it is to stand firm on your rights, but also to stay calm and let facts speak louder than accusations. This experience reminded me that sometimes what looks like a small neighborhood conflict can reveal hidden layers of resentment, deception, or worse. And while it's easy to get caught up in the moment, keeping a clear head and respecting boundaries can make all the difference. Most of all, this was a reminder that respect isn't just about who has authority, but about how we treat each other even when tensions run high. It's a lesson I won't forget anytime soon. And I hope sharing this story helps others see the value in standing their ground without losing their cool. Thanks for listening, and stay safe out there.